Righty, good day everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Aquarium's Online Academy. My name is Luke, joining you from the Aquarium of the Pacific here in Long Beach, California. And today, for our last class of the day, we have got a very fascinating subject. We're going to be talking about seals, sea lions, and their conservation. So really, most of the class today, we're going to be really just talking about what is a seal, what is a sea lion, what makes them different from each other, what makes them similar. And as we go, we'll talk about some of the species that we have locally here in California and maybe bring up a few other species that live around the world. And perhaps, if we have the time, I might even talk about walruses a little bit, which are one of their other relatives, the third member of their family. Now, during this show, just as with all the others that you may have seen, you can text us your questions at 562-286-1838. Again, that's 562-286-1838. And this number will be popping up off and on at the bottom of the screen throughout the program today. And let's see here, what else? Oh yes, of course, remember to make sure you have your parents' permission, if you need your parents' permission, and that you're remembering the texting rates and all that apply and that kind of thing. And also, if you're watching the show after the fact, don't worry, you can still ask these questions. You can email us at live@lbaop.org. Again, that's live@lbaop.org. And we'll be happy to take any questions that you have for us via that email if you are watching the show after it's over. So, to begin our show, I'd like to invite us to just make some observations of some pinnipeds that is members of the seal and sea lion family. Seals and sea lions are called pinnipeds because pinniped means fin foot or feather foot, and I guess their feet are fins, or they kind of look like feathers, even though they don't have feathers. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the third member of that group, the third member of the pinniped group, is the walrus. So you can look, when you think about those animals, all three of them have something in common, right? Let's take a few moments, though, to look at some of the pinnipeds we have here at the aquarium, and those are California sea lions and California harbor seals, and let's see what characteristics they have that might help us to distinguish them from each other. Let's see here. So here is a California sea lion. I think this is Parker when he was younger. And if you look here, you can see that a lot of the features that you would associate with a member of this family, right? But a lot of times people will look at this animal here and go, oh, is it a seal? Because oftentimes when people think of a seal, the animal they imagine in their head is actually a sea lion. And this is just because we've kind of thrown around the word seal kind of willy-nilly over I guess, really recent time for people, at least in the U.S., probably in other parts of the world too, because people haven't always bothered to make that much of a distinction when they use the word seal versus the word sea lion. But actually, most of the time when people are talking about sea lions and stuff like that, like they used to have at circuses and things like that, things that we don't like to do anymore, they were actually looking at that when they would say the word seal, but they were actually referring to a sea lion. And how do you know it's a sea lion? Well, if you look at a sea lion, there's a few easy ways to tell. And the way I always remind myself of this is that there's a few things about sea lions that remind me of lions, which is what they're named after, right? So one of these things is that sea lions, like our friend here, have external ear flaps. You see that right on the side of his head there? That ear flap is an ear flap, just like we've got, right? And that little ear flap is a sign that you're looking at a sea lion. And this just to make it even more confusing for you, there are a few seals, such as, if I remember correctly, the fur seal is one example, that have an external ear flap, and people will be like, well, why is it called the fur seal then? Well, guess what? This is why scientists are so always talking about scientific names versus common names, because actually the fur seal is a member of the sea lion family. It isn't truly a seal. So it's very confusing. But if you're looking at the side of an animal's head, and it looks like a member of this pinniped family of marine mammals, and it's got an external ear flap, you can be very, very confident that you're looking at a sea lion. And if somebody says, no, that's a seal, because maybe it's a fur seal or something, you can say, well, for your information, fur seals are not true seals, but are actually a member of the sea lion family. And that's a good way to remember that. Now, some other things about sea lions that distinguish them from seals is that, although you can't really tell here, maybe we have some video of sea lions swimming. I think we do. Here we go. Sea lions propel themselves through the water almost entirely with movements of their big front flippers. See that? How they're just flapping those big front flippers and pushing themselves through? And those rear flippers, their tail flippers, just sort of they kind of just drag them behind them, and then they use them to turn a little bit, but that's about it. So the way they propel themselves is, again, with those big movements of the front flippers. Now, a harbor seal, on the other hand, I don't know if we have a picture or a video of a harbor seal swimming. Maybe we do. Harbor seals propel themselves very differently. You see, if you look at a harbor seal, kind of, sort of, we can kind of tell here. Harbor seals, oh, it's just precious. Is this Kaya here? Oh, this is what was his name? Troy? Not Troy. Bixby? Yeah, this is Bixby. So this is one of our baby seals back in the day. Now, as you can see in that video, well, actually you can't see that well in that video, but when harbor seals propel themselves to the water, and this is true of all the seals, they really turn with their upper bodies. They only have these front paws in the front. They're much smaller than the flippers that you see on sea lions. You can see they even have a little bit of a claw there on them. And they basically kind of turn their body by moving that part. And the propulsion for them comes from the rear flippers. So sea lions push with the front and steer with the back. Harbor seals, and other seals too, push with the back and kind of steer with the front. So that's another distinction between them. And since we're looking at this harbor seal now, you can see another one of those really significant difference. Although this picture doesn't make it totally obvious because of the dark color of the animal. Do you see any ear flap there? I don't. True seals, whether they be harbor seals, elephant seals, or any other true seal, do not have an external ear flap. So that's one of the easiest ways to tell. Even if just the head of the animal sticking up out of the water, you can tell. And another thing, when you look at this seal on land here, this seal isn't lying down, so to speak. This is basically all a seal can do on land. Harbor seals aren't very, very good at moving on land. Even the more agile seals, like elephant seals can kind of push themselves up on the front of their body a bit. But sea lions are really agile on land compared to seals. And this is because sea lions, if we go back to that picture of young Parker there, I think we'll see this. Sea lions, when they're on land, can move their rear flippers underneath their body so they can walk around on all fours. So they're really agile on land, and over short distances, they can even run faster than a person. So sea lions are very, very agile both on land and in the water, whereas seals, they can move around on land a little. They oftentimes will kind of do the worm. They kind of galump, which is actually the word for it. But they don't have the ability to really run around on land or do anything fast. But that's not to say that seals don't have a leg up or a flipper up on sea lions in some ways. For one thing, harbor seals can hold their breath far longer than our California sea lions can. The sea lions in our exhibit, maybe the longest they ever hold their breath is 9 minutes or so. But harbor seals can hold their breath for up to half an hour. And some seals, such as the elephant seal, can hold their breath even longer than that. And this is an ability that's so impressive, in fact, that sometimes harbor seals will even take naps underneath the water and just sort of sit there. And people will come up and see this seal sitting in the bottom of our aquarium, and they'll go, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with that seal? It's just lying on the bottom." Well, it's just taking a nap, actually. That's a normal seal behavior. So there are some real differences between seals and sea lions in terms of their behaviors and their appearance. These differences are reflected also in the kinds of foods they eat. Sea lions are more about eating squid and fish. Seals are a little bit more interested in bottom foraging, feeding on things like hard-shelled animals and different kinds of mollusks and crustaceans. And now we're starting to get some good question. Kano and some others, apparently, there have been several in this group, asked a few questions. For one thing, how do they live, or how long do they live? So harbor seals and sea lions, just like many marine mammals in the ocean, have lifespans that are much shorter than their lifespans in aquariums generally. Because in the ocean, once a sea lion or a harbor seal starts to slow down, starts to lose its eyesight, starts to lose teeth, starts to maybe get a little arthritis, it becomes really hard for them to hunt, and they usually get eaten by something, like a shark comes along, you know. But at the aquarium, of course, our harbor seals and sea lions do not need to worry about being eaten by anything. So they can live quite a lot longer. In an aquarium environment, seals and sea lions oftentimes live as much as 20 or 30 years, sometimes even longer than that. I think one of our mammalogists said that she knew one that got to 40 one time, or am I thinking? Yeah. So they can live a pretty long time in human care. In the natural habitat, they still have a longer lifespan than a lot of other animals. But they just, it's one of those things that when you're in nature, you can't go to the doctor, you can't get your food fed to you, so they tend to meet their end a little more quickly. And that's true of a lot of different kinds of animals, especially mammals in aquariums. They tend to have lifespans that are significantly longer than they are in the natural habitat. Now, what are some other questions from this same group? What's their favorite food? As I was just saying, that's a good question. Seals, or sorry, I should say sea lions, like Parker here, are mainly interested in feeding on, again, things like fish, things like squid, and sea lions basically eat their food in one bite. They chase it down, grab it in their teeth, and swallow it. Harbor seals have teeth that are a little bit more specialized toward crunching and cracking things in addition to chewing, or in addition to soft things, you know? So they'll go along, they'll grab clams, they'll crack them open, you know, kind of suck out the inside. They'll grab all sorts of stuff that hides in the sand and under the rocks. And you can kind of tell because if you look at the way their body is shaped, they're much more of a foraging kind of shape for their body. These sea lions, as you saw in that swimming video we watched a minute ago, are very agile and fast in the water. Seals more go around kind of slowly, you know, get at things with their paws a little bit, dig under a rock, have a little bit more of a snub nose for that. And then Natalie had a great question. How do they stay warm? Well, this happens to be one of the other major characteristics of the entire pinniped family. If you look at the body of a pinniped, whether it's a sea lion, a seal, or a walrus, you notice how you don't see a lot of really hard edges? You know, there's not a lot of bone or anything sticking out. It's like if I asked you where's Parker's shoulder, you'd probably be like, well, it's in there somewhere, but it's not like I can see a good angle. You know, even the bends in their limbs, right, have a pretty soft edge. This is because, of course, the seals and sea lions and all the pinnipeds, just like many other marine mammals, are surrounded by a thick layer of blubber that is a very, very effective, basically fat layer that keeps their body very, very warm. So this is how they stay warm. They do also have fur, but the fur, although it's important, is not the primary way that they contain heat. The blubber is the major investment in terms of energy. They have this huge amount of blubber in their body. And that amount of blubber that they have increases and decreases over the course of the year as they go through their feeding cycle, their breeding season, and so on. But they always have enough to keep themselves nice and warm. And this is another reason why they always have to, if they're in the natural habitat, they have to be strong enough to keep on eating a lot of food because they have to be able to maintain that blubber layer. If it starts to get too thin, they'll start to get too cold. Really good question. Oh, we have a video of both seals and sea lions. Let's see what we got here. Oh, so here's some sea lions swimming. And there's one of our harbor seals. So now you can see a difference in their, harbor seal, sea lion. And since they're not really pushing themselves, there you can kind of see it with the sea lions. The harbor seals, and some of that land agility there. That is an interesting behavior. I haven't seen that one before. And here's how a harbor seal moves on land. You can see again, not a super agile animal on the land. And by the way, as you were watching that, you might have noticed that there was some interactions going on and some different behaviors. Oh, there we go. Did you see that? How the tail of the seal is going like this? So that's another thing to look for, another seal on a sea lion. And to wrap up my differences, by the way, so I said that there's some things about sea lions that remind me of lions. Well, one of them is that lions, just like sea lions, have external ear flaps. Another one is that sea lions and lions run around on all fours when they're on land. And then the third one is that sea lions are noisy like lions can be. Sea lions make loud barking sounds. It's not exactly a roar like a lion would have, but it is nonetheless a loud noise. Harbor seals, on the other hand, pretty quiet. Don't make a lot of noises. They kind of make this little snorting sound. They can kind of grunt. They can occasionally make a little bit of a kind of a oh noise when they want to. Elephant seals do this a lot, but it's nothing compared to that loud bark that you hear a sea lion making. So do we have any more questions, Stewie? Stewie's on our question board today. It looks like we have more coming in here. Oh, good question. So this is another question that helps us to clarify the differences between different kinds of seals and sea lions. And Leah and RJ asked, how much do they weigh? And the answers vary, of course, depending on the animal you're looking at. The California sea lion, at their biggest, get to 800 or 900 pounds. That's for the males that are much, much larger in that species. The females get to about 200 to 250 pounds, so it's a big difference. And that's true across much of the pinniped family. Usually the males, whether you're talking about seals or sea lions, the males tend to be a lot bigger than the females. Though with harbor seals, actually, it's not that big of a difference. It varies a lot depending on the type of pinniped, but generally the males are at least a little larger, if not a lot larger. And it's a really good question. And then, of course, some seals, some sea lions too, as well as some seals, can get very large. The Steller sea lion, which is one of my favorites and that occasionally does show up here in Southern California. I don't know, Dana, do you think we can get a Steller sea lion picture? We might be able to track one down. We'll see if we can try. The Steller sea lion is kind of like a mega version of the California sea lion. It looks very, very similar, except it's way, way bigger. It's like 4 or 5 times as big in terms of weight. And then if you look at the seal family, there are some really massive seals out there too. Elephant seals, which are the largest of all the pinnipeds, I think even bigger than walruses, can weigh several thousand pounds at their biggest. So they are massive, massive creatures. Any luck on that Steller sea lion? Well, you can look them up at home, since I know you're on the internet right now. So if you've got your parents with you, maybe you can search Steller sea lion. It's spelled, I believe, just like stellar as in stars. It's S-T-E-L-L-A-R. That's the last name of the naturalist who originally described him. And let's now talk about something else about the pinnipeds. Let's talk about what kind of a role do they play in the habitats that they call home. Now, if we look at some pinnipeds out in the natural habitat, maybe we can go look at that video of the sea lions swimming around again. Here we go. That is a very interesting video. Take a moment, if you will, and just observe their behavior. What are they doing, and what is this habitat they live in? So, what is this habitat that we're seeing them in here, right? This is a kelp forest habitat. And this is a habitat that occurs off the coast of California. By the way, a lot of this seems to be play behavior right now, actually. This is a habitat that occurs off the coast of California. And we're lucky to have this habitat because it's really, really impressive, and it's one of the rarest habitats in the world. In this habitat, sea lions are one of the top predators. Yes, they have predators of their own. They get fed on, they get attacked sometimes by sharks and sometimes by orcas, but they are still, most of the time, not afraid of anything. Unless a shark or an orca happens by, sea lions are kind of consider themselves top of the food chain. And they play an important role. Any kind of predatory animal is important in its habitat because all the animals below them on the food chain have over time evolved ways to survive in spite of the fact that they're being preyed upon, right? And this is a little bit counterintuitive because you'd think, well, if the predators go away, wouldn't all the other animals be better off? Well, no, not exactly, because let's say if you're something that is preyed upon by I'm trying to get my hands to line up with these seals here. Say you're something that's preyed upon by sea lions, right? And what if one day all the sea lions were gone? Well, let's say you're a sardine or a squid or something. First, you might be like, well, this is great. All the seals and all the sea lions are gone. But after a while, because those animals have become so effective at reproducing in order to keep their numbers up when they're being eaten, those animals then will eventually get overpopulated. And this is why predatory species are so important to the natural balances of ecosystems. Because if there's too many squid or too many sardines, then they might be consuming too much of the plankton or something like that. Or it might cause a disruption elsewhere in the food chain. And with sea lions, there's luckily a lot of other animals that eat squid and sardines and stuff, right? But what about seals? They're going along eating all these bottom-dwelling mollusks and crustaceans and stuff, right? If seals were to disappear, some of those animals might get overpopulated and might spread and make it hard for the kelp itself to grow. Situations like this have happened before when sea otters disappeared in California. The kelp forest shrank in a lot of places as well because the sea otters were eating the urchins that were otherwise going to consume the kelp. So it is important for these large species like this to continue to thrive. And speaking of large species, Dana says she has some pretty cool video, I think, for us. Are we ready to watch? Look at this. We will be in 1 moment. I'm hoping that we can get some footage of the largest of the member of the seal and seal family. Seal and seal family? The seal and sea lion family that lives here in California. And that, of course, is the elephant seal. But we'll see what we can do. We got it? Okay, let's bring some elephant seals up here. I want to look at these things. So, this is footage courtesy of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This is just some footage of some elephant seals hanging out. Now, elephant seals are, in addition to being one of the goofiest looking animals in the world, also actually fairly dangerous and also pretty impressive in a lot of ways. Elephant seals, in spite of the fact that they don't have that rotating hip to bring underneath their body, they do have a lot of impressive behaviors they do on land. For example, right here, we're looking at two male elephant seals basically having a little contest. You see, oh, here they go. Wow, look at that. This this kind of aggressive looking behavior is what male elephant seals do to decide which one of them gets to live on a given stretch of beach. And this is important for them because when it comes time for the breeding season, the male with the largest beach area also gets the largest number of mates. So elephant seals, you can actually see them do this up in central California if you go around San Simeon and stuff like that. Every year they come to the beaches in these huge numbers, thousands of them all piling together. And you can see some examples of them here. I think this is in Channel Island somewhere. Hundreds of them there. And they'll sometimes even pile up denser than this. And they like to be close together. Even if there's a lot of room, they'll kind of always cluster close together. It's very interesting. And you can see them, they like to cover themselves with sand so that the sun doesn't burn their skin. And they just sit there, just hanging out for weeks at a time. It is pretty ridiculous. And you can see that the local seagulls aren't too afraid of them. And you can tell also which ones are the males. The really massive ones, those are the males. And they do this again during their molting season when they're growing new fur, and also during their breeding season. But when they're not here on these beaches, they look like these big lazy animals here, right? When they're not here on these beaches, they might swim thousands of miles out into the ocean. Look at this guy. They might swim thousands of miles out into the ocean in order to hunt for food. They might start their year at a beach somewhere in central California or one of the Channel Islands or something like that. Then once they've hung out for long enough, maybe they got their fur back or maybe they finished raising their young, they then travel out into the ocean. They might go as far as Alaska hunting for food. It's absolutely incredible, the migration that these animals do and the amount of and what they can do when they're out in the water. But unfortunately for us, they're kind of hard to study when they're in the water, right? Because you have to follow them around. They sometimes dive thousands of feet down. So observing elephant seals when they're hunting is very, very difficult. And so we don't really know quite as much about them when it comes to that part of their lifestyle. But we do know a lot about what they do when they're on beaches here in California. And it's a lot of fun to watch. And if you ever get the chance, once we're all able to go out and explore again, I strongly recommend going up and having a look at elephant seals, especially if you live here in California, because it's a drive, but it's quite worth checking out at the right times of year. Now, we have a few more questions that are coming in, so we'll focus on those before we wrap up. Do sea lions have predators? Yes, they do. As I mentioned, sea lions can be preyed upon by great white sharks and a few other kinds of sharks, especially when they're babies, though the adults get preyed upon too. But the thing about sea lions, though, is that, you think, oh, so sharks are eating sea lions. Well, guess what? Sea lions also eat sharks sometimes. So although, yes, it's true, sharks will prey on sea lions because basically a big shark will prey on a smaller sea lion. Big sea lions will sometimes prey on smaller sharks, so it can go both ways. Let's see. Another question. Oh, this is a good one for us here at the aquarium. Do sea lions enjoy playing with toys or do seals enjoy playing with toys like sea lions do? And Thea and RJ asked that one. Good question. Honestly, of all the observations I've made here at the aquarium, the sea lions tend to like the toys a lot. The seals, not as much. It's very true. They definitely don't have as much interest in them as so far as I've observed, but they're still very trainable. And they still participate in training just as much as the sea lions do. It's just that since their on-land behaviors aren't as complex and they're not as agile, that means that they just don't do as much stuff. And this is also, by the way, a big part of the reason why sea lions tend to have been so much more famous than seals, because seals do all their most impressive stuff in the water, whereas sea lions, for a long time, people used to train them as entertainment and stuff, which we don't do anymore. But we do still do training for our seals and sea lions here at the aquarium to make sure that they stay healthy, because we do have to have them help out with their medical care. We got to make sure that they're getting the food they need. And we also just have to be able to check on them and make sure they're getting exercise and stuff like that. Now we have some more questions. Kano asked, are their tails made of cartilage? Ooh. So seals and sea lions, so I think you were probably, Kano, and I'm sorry, it might be Kano, I'm not sure which one it is, but either way, great name, man. Now, you were going to say, you were asking, are their tails made of cartilage? Good question. So seals and sea lions are bony animals, right? Just like us. They're mammals. Mammals have bones. And you're probably asking in contrast to things like sharks, right, that we explained earlier, have cartilaginous skeletons. Well, the interesting thing is that there's cartilaginous animals like sharks and stingrays, right? And then there's bony animals like, say, for example, mammals and bony fish and birds and seals and sea lions. But the bony animals actually do have cartilage as well. All the spaces between our bones, the connective the things that connect our different bones together, and parts of our body like our ear flaps, which sea lions have too, and our noses and so on, have cartilage in them. So yeah, there is a lot of cartilage in their tails, but there's also a lot of bone in there as well. Very good question. Oh, this is a good one. Do they have a specific type of smell? How to describe the smell of a sea lion or a seal? I would start with bad. Now, oftentimes you don't notice this because, at the aquarium, their exhibit's very clean. And if they go for a swim, it kind of rinses it off, but it tends to come back pretty quickly once they're out of the water. And if you're downwind of a large colony of elephant seals, gee, what words would I use? Well, rancid, rotten. I mean, if you imagine, right, yeah, imagine what poop smells like, right? Imagine now what rotten fish smells like. Now imagine poop that's full of rotten fish. There you go. That's what seals and sea lions smell like in large enough numbers. Boy, what a question. Who asked that? Do we have a name on that question? Well, whoever asked that question, very brave of you to try to make me answer that one. I hope it didn't gross everybody else out. But yes, if you ever go visit the elephant seals and take a look at them, you'll have to hope that you are upwind of them the day you visit, because I guess you'll want to go in the afternoon to make sure the wind's more blowing out to sea, because yeah, they ain't the most delightful smelling creatures in the world. Now, finally, since I did say we're going to talk about conservation, we have a good last question here, or one of our last questions. We might have time for a couple more. We'll see. Are seals or sea lions endangered? The answer to this question is depends on the seal or sea lion you're talking about. So far as I know, I don't think any sea lion species are endangered that I know of, but I could easily be wrong about that. There are, however, seal species that are endangered, and some that have gone extinct. One that's extinct already is the Caribbean monk seal, which was certified extinct, I think, a few decades ago. Also, the Hawaiian monk seal, which is a similar seal, lives in Hawaii, is endangered today. There's only about, we're not sure about the numbers, but the estimates vary between about 6 and 1,400, depending on what source you look at. But there's not very many of them left. And luckily for us, though, here in California, the seal and sea lion populations are pretty healthy. This is in large part because our seals and sea lions have a lot of coast to work with, right? If you're the Hawaiian monk seal, you're kind of in a limited amount of habitat, and if things start to go wrong with that habitat, there's not really a lot of places you can go because they're stuck out, thousands of miles out in the middle of the ocean. But our local seal and sea lion populations, luckily, they have a lot of coast and a lot of different options, and so it's a little easier for them to move around if disruptions happen. But that being said, they did have major times in the past where the seal and sea lion populations have collapsed. One of the reasons for this has been ocean pollution, which can poison the water and the food sources they depend upon. Another had to do in the past with fishing. Oftentimes seals and sea lions would be caught in nets and stuff like that. And also sometimes poaching. Sometimes, people just didn't like seals and sea lions, and they would, well, get rid of them, so to speak. But luckily, here in the United States today, every marine mammal species, and this is true in most parts of the world at this point, marine mammals are protected. And this means that you can't go out attacking seals and sea lions. You have to, our fishing, all of the fishing that we do in this country, we try very, very hard to make sure that it's regulated in such a way that prevents seals and sea lions from being harmed by it. And in a lot of parts of the United States, there's a lot of marine protected areas that serve as sanctuaries for a lot of these animals, allowing them to continue to grow and thrive. And it is really good news to hear that actually when it comes to the kinds of things that you can do to create a more sustainable ocean, we've done a lot of those things in the U.S. these days. There's still a huge amount of work to do. Many animals that have become endangered in the past that we still need to work on seeing if we can help to get them back to something like a healthy number in the ocean. Also, there's habitats like the kelp forest that probably used to be about 10 times or more as much kelp forest as there is today. So those habitats are way smaller than they used to be. But at the very least, we can say that most seal and sea lion species are doing all right, at least here in the areas in California. But definitely there are threats in other parts of the world, and it's really worth considering. And when we talk about endangered pinniped species, going beyond just seals and sea lions, remember that walruses up there, the far north, are really threatened by climate change. A lot of the habitats they depend upon just kind of don't exist anymore as their habitat gets too warm. So conserving seals and sea lions and walruses, all the members of the pinniped family, really is important Not just because they're wonderful and interesting and goofy and, yes, smelly animals, but also because they play really important roles in the ocean. With big predatory animals like that, if we can keep them healthy, that means that we've succeeded in keeping a lot of other stuff below them healthy. So when we focus on large animals, in a way, it's kind of a good plan, because in order to protect a big predatory animal that has to depend on a whole ecosystem in order to get the food it needs, that means you have to protect that ecosystem too, and a lot of other animals can be protected along the way. So let's keep on protecting seals and sea lions, because it's absolutely worth it. If you have any more questions about this, remember you can email us after the show at live@lbaop.org. Again, that's live@lbaop.org. That's for Long Beach Aquarium of Pacific, lbaop.org. And I hope you've really enjoyed our show, and I hope you join us again tomorrow. Our first online Academy to World will be at 9 a.m., and what's it going to be about? It is going to be about camouflage. We'll be joining Captain Joe tomorrow again for Camouflage, another episode of Aquarium Live. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.